I'd like to start this off with a story. There was a Twitter user I knew a couple of months ago, or met a couple of months ago, and her name was Jennifer. And for 3 years prior to me encountering her, she had been tweeting day to day about the Yemen conflict. And this is where the United States, under the presidencies of both Obama and Trump, had began assisting Saudi Arabia in systematically committing a genocide. And the way they did this was by closing off the ports to Yemen, which prevented new food and medicine from coming in, while food that was already being grown there, if it was captured by someone willing to sell it, was price gouged. So people, and I can give you actual numbers, we've had 85,000 children under the age of 5 who have died from either malnourishment or from being bombed to death. And they oftentimes say that many of the people that live there will go to sleep with their hands over their head like this, wondering if they're going to wake up alive or never again from being bombed overnight. You might ask yourself, why would you start this, discussing this while talking about NeverTrump? And it is relevant because it's an example of how you can get a group, and let me say a little envoy, that has no direct aim and is just completely doomed to fail based off of that premise. So what do I mean by that? Well, ask a person who is against Trump. Shows how good their message is getting, though. Yeah, well, that's been around for a few years, but ask yourself about people who are against Trump. What are you against him for? What do you want to ultimately happen? Do you want him to be impeached? Do you want him to resign? Do you want him to stop doing what he's doing in office? And I get varied answers. There are people who say if he gets impeached, everything will suddenly get better. Well, let's enter that scenario. So let's say he gets removed from office, he resigns, whatever. Then you get Pence, who I'm about 99% sure that a vast majority of the people who despise Trump to the point of stalking his Twitter feed and being obsessed with everything he writes, and rather being obsessed with being opposed to every single thing he does, have no clue what Pence's record is. A good example of what I'm talking about is the decision to pull out of Syria. I've said it repeatedly. Um, I am not a fan of pretty much anything Trump's done in office, but the decision to pull out of Syria was something to be commended, along with meeting with North Korea during the summit, because those are two moves toward non-interventionalism as far as starting another war. And I don't care what the reason was. You had people who are speculating maybe he was doing it because Putin is influencing him. And I didn't care, because if the end result is what I want, it doesn't matter to me how we get there. I don't care if he pulled out because he wants to screw 30 Syrian women without us being aware. It didn't matter to me. But these are the kind of things where if they were done by Obama, the Never Trump people would get upset with you for being opposed to it. They would call you a warmonger. They would say you're insane. And then you go on places like Twitter, and you watch the same group of people who, if you ask them, do you prefer for us to be in more countries? I mentioned before the US was bombing 7 countries. They would say no. But when they say no, they're saying that because what they're really expressing is that they're opposed to Trump, and not necessarily these conflicts, just the fact that he's committing them. Whereas before, when it was a Democrat or someone that they weren't paying attention to all that much, they were completely fine with it. And it really shows you that it's not about ideology, because as I said before, Trump gets out and then you're stuck with Pence and he does the exact same things, except maybe more wars, arguably. And I don't want that. So that's why when I see all of the posts about, oh, I hope we get rid of him. Oh, I hope we get rid of him. It doesn't do anything for me. But you go on places like Twitter, and you look at some of the stuff that the different possible, let's say, presidential candidates are saying. You look at Klobuchar, this woman who supported military intervention in Libya, as well as apparently here, starts talking about, I am very concerned with why we're pulling out of there. Now, if a Republican had said that, all of these Never Trump people would be saying, "Oh yeah, you're crazy, you're insane." And all of a sudden, they start loving Lindsey Graham, this the warmonger of warmongers, because he happens to, on this one particular issue, disagree with Trump, and they hated him 2 months ago. Envoy says if a Democrat commits these war crimes, they don't care. Heck, they praised Obama for catching bin Laden. Uh, Envoy also writes, "It's so ironic you bring this up. It's a double standard with Obama and Trump. This is why politics is such." No, it's tribalism, Envoy. And what ends up happening is anyone who doesn't follow the tribe gets diminished. I brought up the thing with Jennifer because that was someone who was sick of tribalism because she saw all of these people being murdered in this foreign country, for no reason, as far as like actually being terrorists and planning to get the U.S. since we've never had a terrorist attack from Yemen, and all of these different quote unquote resistors would get pissed at her for when she mentioned it being under Obama, because in their heads they don't want you to make their boy look bad by getting pissed at him for the exact same reasons you're pissed at Trump. In other words, they want you to erase reality in favor of living in this dream world where the guy before was perfect and everything else prior to that was just wonderful. It's like when I was talking about how George W., the Bush 43, had this new approval rating where most Americans liked him. And I was losing my mind at it because this isn't like something I read out of a history book. I was there. I remember, the surveillance state starting under him. I remember being in Iraq year after year, him starting the longest war ever, Hurricane Katrina and his crappy response to that, and then the markets crashing in 2008. Like, these are all things that I was there to see. And, now I'm being told 10 years later, oh, he wasn't that bad. He was actually kind of good. No, he wasn't. But again, in their disdain for this one president, this guy, Trump, now everything and anything that came before is all right. Envoy says, well, why follow the tribe? Where does it get you? Isn't the number one goal is to make America a better place for citizens? Shaking my head, some loss of sight. This is, well, we're getting to a point where Trump can literally do anything and it would get the same group of people resisting him. He could come out tomorrow, and I mentioned this before, that he used to support single payer healthcare. Where your taxes go up, but then your healthcare is free, so you save money in the long run, whatever. So bottom line is that he could introduce this, and I would go on here and say that's a good thing because it's a policy I support, regardless of what politician from what party backs it. And then they would lose their minds. They would go, "You're trying to institute a government takeover." But then if Obama had did it, they would have said, "Oh, such a great man! What a wonderful thing!" Because they have no ideology. And they've turned people like me who don't love any of these people into these seeming recurring defenders of individuals we really don't care anything about. Good example, when everyone was losing their mind back in July over that Helsinki summit with Putin, and oh my God, you heard McCain talk about the disgraceful performance. I wasn't upset because I thought maybe we can get better relations with Russia and not have to go into a war. And then later on this year, when they pull out of the INF treaty, which we've had for literally 30 years since Reagan, every president stayed in it, or when they threatened to pull out of it, rather, because they said Russia was violating it. Days later, and I did a video about it, Putin announced they have these missiles that can pierce U.S. defenses. But as I'm reading this seeming heightened of tensions between the U.S. and Russia, I'm getting told that the U.S. president is somehow buddy with Putin. So how the hell are relations getting worse? But then these two world leaders are supposedly, one is in the pocket of the other one. That wouldn't be happening if that were the case. Envoy says this is what social media has done. It's blinded people in both camps. Identity politics at its best. I actually think that's true because, don't misrepresent my opinion. I think Trump supporters, by and large, are as empty as the opponents in a lot of instances. So what I mean by that? Well, I actually had one of them on Twitter try to argue with me and say, we're bombing 7 countries and we have 900 military bases and we have troops in over 150 countries, so we can stop the terrorists before they get over here, as though that's actually prevented all of the deaths that we've had. But that's them bending over for the military industrial complex, because at that time Trump wasn't doing anything in favor of non-interventionism or peace or any of those kinds of ideas. So when you get him to now start getting out of wars, they change their tune. They go from being the, we've got to be everywhere to let's get out of everywhere. Good idea, Mr. President. Empty suits on both sides. Just like I just remember his Charlottesville phrase that made everyone lose their minds about the good people on both sides. That's exactly what that is. There are people on both sides who do not have an actual ideology and are just going to go with the flow. And they don't have any critical thinking skills about would I care? Would I be this mad if a Democrat did this? Would I be happy or angry if someone of the party I like went and did this? Like, it's just them not thinking critically, and we're supposed to sit here and now hope that Trump gets removed because suddenly a rainbow is going to come and all of the things that people are pissed off about, even if it's something to rightfully be mad about, like the Yemen war, which again was under a Democrat and then continued by a Republican. So you can already kind of see where someone would think it doesn't matter what party you put in there. We're just supposed to think all this stuff is going to get fixed if he gets out, even with Pence taking over. Dirk says that's just mental gymnastics they make when Russia is mentioned. Yeah, but it's not based in reality or based on what we've actually seen. You don't have the president of Russia say, we have missiles that can pierce American defense systems when we have better relations, or if our president is truly in the pocket of him. That doesn't make any sense. Dirk, they hope they, and that's another thing, the Yemen thing. You actually have people who will say, and this is again how ridiculous this stuff has gotten. Why do you care so much about people in a foreign country? Why does that bother you? I really want you to think, and this again, let's use basic empathy skills here. Let's pretend Yemen is the world's leading superpower. So all the people that are over there are already over there, and let's say the U.S. is the same size, but Yemen's just that much bigger. And let's say that Saudi Arabia comes over here and they start blocking the ports for food and medicine to come in, as well as going and deciding to start bombing all over. And so we get reports of, thousands of people have, died this year and they might die next year and they're on the verge of cholera. Do you really think any of the Americans in that instance, in that alternate world where we're in Yemen's position, would be happy that the world's leading superpower, the country that prides itself on getting involved everywhere, is saying, screw you, we don't care how many of you die because you're not on U.S. soil? Envoy asks. So again, it's lack of empathy, lack of compassion, no human. And ironically enough, I'm getting this from liberals and Democrats. The people that are supposed to care about others that have not had the same circumstances themselves. So they're becoming the hardcore, we don't care one way or the other way individuals that they oftentimes claim that Republicans are, which is ironic because we have people like Rand Paul and Mike Lee who have been consistent on that particular issue of non-interventionism. But whatever, they're not smart. Envoy asks, do you want Trump to step down or get impeached personally? I would rather he finish his term because, again, as someone that is not a fan of him, I do find it very satisfying just what he would do in the scenario of not winning re-election. And also, I think that if there's a problem, like with the media is stupid because they have a low approval rating and they think what they have to say actually is good or people, buy into it. So when they attack a candidate, they make that person look better to regular people who despise the media. So when Trump says it's fake news, it lands because people believe the media is disingenuous when they talk about certain things. Envoy says, don't try and make Americans understand empathy. That's perhaps the hardest thing to get most Americans to understand. I guess Israel's the only place U.S. empathizes with. Yeah, well, Israel, its little right-wing screwed up government is literally worse than Trump's. Netanyahu is Lucifer in the flesh. But they do this thing where they try to say, oh, if you talk about the Israeli government, you're trying to justify the Holocaust and the treatment of Jews and just, bring up stuff that has nothing to do with what you're talking about. It's a really slick thing they've done where they tried to, just like with Mark Lamont Hill, they you mentioned wanting anything for the Palestinians, that's the end of you, or people will like just smear, 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 because they're against freedom of speech. The U.S. In so many different capacities shows itself through its people to not tolerate basic human commonalities. Just like, we sit over here and we see all these mass shootings, um, and people refer to the Second Amendment. And we've had amendments before which were designed to update the Constitution as things change and things become different. So they're going to use a philosophy from a period where there were no mass shootings whatsoever to justify the mass shootings just being allowed to happen by a lack of new laws to do anything about them. And then they'll bring up somewhere like Chicago as if it's an island that, no one can bring a gun from another state and use it over there. But this is how ridiculous this stuff gets. Envoy says, very true, but if you talk about Israel, you're anti-Semitic. Yeah, even if you're just discussing the government, it's same thing with Saudi Arabia. Well, they're a little bit easier to criticize, but the U.S. will never go after them over anything. And these are the kind of issues where when you bring them up, they show you how similar the two parties are. But because people are so caught up in their I hate Trump hysteria, they're not going to realize we have had gaping issues that have gone on year after year, decade after decade, and no one did anything about them. And now, we have this guy who we're all pissed at for winning this election, when his exact positions, even if he's gotten rid of, will be continued by members of Congress who will likely run for president themselves later on. Certainly his vice president will. Remember, Mattis resigned. I disagree with Mattis, but he resigned because he was upset about Trump pulling out of Syria. Notice how Pence hasn't resigned, because he's fine with every single thing Trump has done and probably would do every single thing if he came into power. And remember, your little Mueller thing, I have yet to see a single thing about indicting Pence. So, that scenario that they're hoping for is going to be the exact same ideology, just with a different name and face on it. Oh yeah, the oil resource. But then look at the I'll give you another example. The Kavanaugh thing. The whole reason people should have been pissed off at him, if they were liberals, progressive, whatever, is that he votes with corporations 87% of the time, bad reproductive rights record. But then it gets turned into this circus with this woman coming forward. And look, I've said it before. I don't care if it's a Democrat, a Republican, a singer, an actor, whatever. I find it very suspicious to wait 30 years plus to come and say, this person did something to me. The only reason I gave her any credibility is because when they asked him about, doing a seventh investigation, he wouldn't directly answer it. And, he would say, oh, we've already had 6, which discounts the fact that they did not look for this because they were unaware of it when they conducted the investigations. And then the investigation that Trump ordered didn't even let anybody to hardly see it. So that, that still is, I lean toward believing her only because of his actions, not because someone came forward and said, this person was responsible for doing this to me in 1983. No. But again, the principal reason that the Democrats should have opposed him was because of his ideology, and that got completely lost in their little stupid resistance thing. Let's keep harping about this potential, allegation to the point where it completely drowns out his positions, which are the whole reason that anyone should be against any Supreme Court nominee. Their actual belief system. Envoy asks, would you say a downfall of America is how involved in other nations' affairs? Back to centuries, wars have broken out: Vietnam, Pearl Harbor, Iraq, and Middle East. It's crazy how America pokes its nose in so many affairs. Remember, I told you when back when we did the Syria strikes in April, I was pissed off because, why are we have nothing to do with them. But I had people that, were trying to tell me that this was a good thing. Just keep getting, and again, they said that because their party leaders said that, and they don't believe in thinking critically. They just know if Trump does it, they can say it's bad because they'll go and look at what the Democrat says, even though in a lot of cases you actually have the Democrats who, if they oppose Trump on war and peace, it's to the right of him. So, like, for example, he pulled out when he announced the pulling out of Syria. The House minority leader, Steny Hoyer, was like, "That's irresponsible. What are you doing?" And these are the people we're supposed to want to, look at as heroes, as trying to do things that are in our best interest. And that's what they think is in our best interest, to be involved in a bunch of countries we have nothing to do with. But then, you look at this and you go and factor in the idea that so many people think this way. They go and, they don't have an ideology. They're just pissed at Trump over everything. They go and they support anyone who says something bad about him, no matter who it is. And that's exactly what led to the environment that got him the tribalism, and what's going to lead to the environment that creates either a Pence presidency or any other, Democrats that has a number of positions just like Trump, just like the immigration thing. Now, look, my own position is I favor amnesty. I think Americans kill each other too much to where they should even be concerned about other people, whatever. But the bottom line is that I always thought Democrats were full of crap when they would talk about being resistant to the wall, when their own presidential candidate, Hillary, talked about wanting a barrier, aka a wall. And I'm supposed to not think that that was a position that they've ever supported via their support for her. Which, by the way, let's not forget Obama's deportations of, what was it, 2 million people, and then ICE being a thing since 2005, and only becoming, something under scrutiny this year after 12 full years of doing the exact same thing to all these different people that it's doing now. And none of them cared. Last thing I was another establishment candidate. Told you, Dirk, I can't even get excited about that presidential election because, again, the Democrats are hypocrites. They blame, and this is, again, let's go back to, being a progressive here. I've said before, there are 4 people that can be the Democratic nominee I will vote for. So that's Bernie. Let me not even do the finger thing. That's Bernie. That's Elizabeth Warren, and Tulsi Gabbard. And I wanted to say Nina Turner, but I doubt she's running. And I mention that because when you look at the smears, and you got to remember, these are the same people who are, they accused him back then, and to this day, of disrupting the unity within the Democratic Party, making it to where now we're not all thinking the same, because we're all supposed to just be this big bubble of Democrats that vote for whoever is put up in front of us without, surveilling what their actual positions are. That's a smart strategy. You have the leader of the free world be someone we don't even know the positions of. But, they say that he disrupted the unity of the party. And then you go and you look on Twitter, what do you see? Hashtag never Bernie. What are those going to do if he gets the nomination? Oh, I know, probably not vote for him or keep writing their little stupid stuff on Twitter. And would you say that that's disrupting the party? Remember, it's the same thing. You didn't want to, you disagreed with who won the primary, so you won't back them in the general. Or if you do, you're going to back them reluctantly, and still have these ideas of you could have something different. So do you see how they're hypocrites? Because when it's their person that wins, you need to back us. When it's your person that wins, hashtag never insert name here. And this is seriously what they want us to believe, that their positions, we need to accept and just fall in line. I mean, I have these people talk to me like what they have to say matters. I answer the comments a lot of times when we do these streams, because the individuals who come over and over again, I know enough about in terms of just their positions and way of asking things to feel vindicated and that I'm not speaking to a complete fool. And we mention all these different issues. It's designed to say, I do not care which party gets in office as long as I can get the positions, or a majority of them, that I want. Trump tomorrow could come out and put in single payer health care and the Green New Deal and getting out of the wars. And I would never criticize him probably ever again. I don't care if he called it, all the different people stupid or talked about the press being, evil. It doesn't matter to me because it's rhetoric that, I don't agree with in place of positions and issues that I actually support. And like I said before, that needs to be the way people think. But because they don't, you have the Never Trump thing, which is, people getting pissed because American troops are being sent home from Syria. That's a great thing Trump did. I don't have a problem admitting it. And I wouldn't have a problem admitting it no matter who it was. Doesn't matter if it's the Democrats, the Republican Party, the Green Party, the Libertarian Party, the Rent is Too Damn High Party, the Black Panther Party, the Whig Party. It does not matter. As long as those positions are being implemented, it shouldn't be of a concern to people, but it is. Um, not the way people think. They go and they get upset because you now are a Trump loyalist. You hated him. It's like, yeah, but I just don't like this particular president or this candidate or whatever because of what they do. So when they do something I like, which I liked before they did it, I'm not going to change my position. I'll suddenly start wondering why would they do this and what's the ulterior motive. It doesn't. It should not matter. But that's why this resistance thing is going to fail. That's why they're going to end up poor. And again, it's to show you how it's already screwing up regular people. Bernie actually won't come out and say anything about the Syrian withdrawal. And you can call this speculation, but probably because he thinks that the same resistors are going to get mad at him for supporting anything Trump does, even if it's in line with his positions. Yeah, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. You can't praise Trump or critique him; people will attack you. Yeah, because they've turned their critical thinking skills off. Like the whole point of this whole stream was me saying if he does things I like, I will support those things I like. That's a very simple position. Um, but I've had to use multiple examples of it because people still act confused when it's talked about or when you specifically go into the problems that are in place here. You're going to get a Democrat. If this ideology continues, the Never Trump stuff, you're going to eventually get another Democrat who does the exact same thing on immigration, continues bombing all these different countries, has some stupid right-wing healthcare plan like Obamacare, which was developed by the Republicans by the Heritage Foundation. And all of these issues that if they were done by Trump, people would be losing their minds over are going to get swept under the rug, not talked about. And the people that actually are consistent and get pissed no matter which party does it are going to continue to be demonized. I had a guy, and this is when I first started the Twitter campaign for the 717 billion military budget, where I was talking about how the hell can you have the Democrats sit here and say that they are worried about America under Trump's reign, but then they give him hundreds of billions of dollars to do whatever he wants with the military. And I, referred to the fact that most people from both parties voted for it. And this guy told me that I, again, with my evidence of who voted for it, I was similar to Alex Jones. And I would like InfoWars and that, he's been around too long to not know the difference between the Democrats and Republicans. When the whole point of the argument is if they both vote the same or do the same thing, what's the difference? Which the answer is there isn't. And he uses his own little emotional thing of the Democrats of 30 or 40 years ago to make up for this one stupid vote that both sides participated in. This is why I don't lie myself to parties. I think the party's plan is to make people devoid of true critical thinking. Yeah, they've turned serious issues, whether we bomb and kill thousands of people, into almost like a basketball team. Oh man, who's going to be running this season? I mean, dude, if you go on Twitter right now and you look up Klobuchar, and I bring her up because this one is like the crappiest out of the ones of the Democrats that keep getting brought up over and over again. But if you go and you look up her name, if you look up O'Rourke's name, you look up pretty much any of the Democrats' names, other than maybe Warren. And even then, they're going to talk about her being Indian or something that's irrelevant, but she did contribute to that. They're not discussing their positions on issues. They're just talking about who can appeal to the most people because they're in this state and they're strong and all these other empty platitudes. And I mentioned this before. with Pelosi. Here's a person who, when people talk about, praising her, which it's a very small amount because she has a 29% approval rating, so people on both sides can't stand her. They mention her as being someone that's strong, as someone that is fierce, can put up with Trump, all of these empty platitudes, and they'll occasionally bring up Obamacare. But if you only pass one bill in 30 years of being in the House, that's a failure. Like that, there's no other way to put it. Just like I oftentimes bring up Ro Khanna, who a lot of people don't seem to know, the congressman from Silicon Valley, as a congressman who's only been in office for 2-3 years, going on his second term, and he's been a tremendous success. Went after Amazon, was critiquing the wars. Just this, I mean, he's amazing. But I have a polar opposite opinion of him as I do Pelosi, and I can actually name for you issues he's participated in just 2 years of being in office that make me believe he's a really good member of the House. So when I see these people talking about her and using all these platitudes for, to sum up a decades-long career, that tells me that she is a piece of crap. And again, as someone especially that knows her record, just like if you guys remember, we had 5 Democrats who voted against getting out of Yemen, or rather blocking the resolution. You might remember this. There were 5 of them that voted against it, that it, to where we can't get out of there for the rest of this year, which, was earlier in the month when this happened. If she's such a great, strong, leader of the House for the Democrats, why didn't she create the unity that would have stopped them from doing that? These are basic things that if you're going to tell me this person should be the leader of a party and they show the ineffectiveness to even do something as simple as that, they're a failure. Just like with Schumer. They tell you you're sexist if you criticize Pelosi. Schumer needs to be gotten rid of too. Here's a guy who said, while we're trying to not confirm Kavanaugh, oh, there will be no repercussions for member of my caucus who vote for. So you're basically saying, yeah, you can do whatever you want, even though it's not what I want. I won't do anything to you. And no one is upset, no one thinks, wow, we should get rid of that person. But the only reason those two stay in power is because they bribe the members of their caucus, they fundraise the most money to vote for them to stay at the top in terms of leadership. So it's a scratch my back, I scratch your back kind of thing. All that vote against must be primaried out of office. I think they will, Dirk. But yeah, just like all of this stuff proves why the leading Democrats in Washington are terrible. The leading Republicans are, awful, but they're supposed to be bad. They're supposed to have the positions that are backwards. And that, there is a silver lining to Trump not being a politician. It's a small silver line where we might get a couple of things we might like, just as I brought up the examples earlier in this video. But because people are so, hate-filled toward him, they blind themselves from crediting anything that he does, no matter what it is. If it's an escalation of a war, they hate it, which they rightfully should. But if it's the opposite, they're still pissed off. So it's toxic enough to where it infects people who normally would criticize him, like myself, when they give him the slightest itty bitty amount of praise. So it's sad. Let's say a little Donahue before I get out of here. So I hope you guys continue to think critically and don't let anyone bully you into, blindly despising someone. Despise a political candidate or person that's in office for what they advocate for / have done in office. And it really should be as simple as that. I oftentimes bring up people like Walter Jones or Rand Paul or Mike Lee because they're Republicans who I like for their positions on a number of issues, because they actually have principles and they're doing things that I agree with. And whenever my belief system is supported by members of a political party that I do not like, the party I don't like, I will like the person who does it because they're doing what I want. So thank you for that compliment, Envoy. Have a good day.